That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
This is it. This is the video where y'all come from me. I know that so many people love giving me hate whenever I come out and I make these videos where I say, you can't draft these players. And to be honest, I welcome the hate, but I need it in a specific way. Now, you can come out, you can say, Mason, you're ugly. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a bum. You just have no idea what's going on here. And while all of that may be true, what's actually going to be a lot more helpful is if you go to the comment section, and this is what I say for every single video, and instead of telling me how stupid I am, tell me why I am stupid. Tell me what I can do to improve. Tell me what I may be missing on one or two of these players, because these 5 guys, I will show y'all out of all my real money drafts, I am very, very rarely drafting them at all. I think that if you're drafting them anywhere close to your ADP, I mean, you're probably going to be losing out on some money this season. But of course, guys, before we get into it, please make sure you go down there, drop that like, leave a comment telling me how dumb I am, subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 40,000 subscribers. And also, use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, where we are live streaming every single night. My favorite place to play fantasy football. I mean, just come out to a live stream, see how fun it is. When you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, make a $10 deposit. You actually get $25 added to your account. You get our 2021 fantasy football rankings. You get our 2021 fantasy football draft guide, our 2021 fantasy football tiers, our 2021 dynasty rookie draft guide. This should be literally all getting sold for $90, $100, whatever it is, hundreds of pages of information. But because of our partnership with Underdog Fantasy, it's all sponsored. So make sure you just use promo code FLOCK, make that deposit, get all of that. And instead of having to go pay $60 for a draft guide, you probably get a better one. And at the same time, I mean, it costs you a $10 deposit. Now let's go through and let's talk about these players, and let's get to our first guy, Darrell Henderson. So I know Darrell Henderson's been someone that we've been talking about for a little over a month now, and me saying that I'm not drafting him in any league. Now, this is going to be a take that I know a lot of people are looking at going, well, Mason, of course it's easy to say this now, but we were saying this before the Sony Michel trade. And with a Darrell Henderson, the reason that we were going out here and saying it and why you had to be avoiding him in the 4th round, and instead we thought that he was a player that should be going at the end of the 5th round. And this is why. I mean, what is so cool about Underdog Fantasy, just as a quick side note, is when you play in as many leagues as I do, I mean, we are closing in on 200 leagues very soon. What's really cool is you can go and you can look the exposure of your players, and you can see exactly how many leagues and what the percentage of leagues that you drafted that player in is. And here with the Darrell Henderson, I have drafted him in 0.8% of leagues. Less than 1% of 12-man leagues I've actually drafted Darrell Henderson, showing y'all exactly how much I was avoiding him. And the reasoning behind that is we always knew this was a backfield that was bringing someone else in. They weren't going to go into the season with just Darrell Henderson and undrafted free agents and 7th round running backs. And at the same time, with the Darrell Henderson, he also suffers that finger injury, which of course is not a positive sign to get him started for the season. Now, it's not going to be a major red flag. There are other red flags that I'd like to discuss. And here, if I just talk about my ranking on a Darrell Henderson and how I think that our take may end up actually changing, I really want to see where his price is going to go, because before the trade of a Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson was actually being drafted as the running back 18 on Underdog Fantasy, and we actually had him ranked as the running back 22. And now I will say that this is probably going to be something that takes a little bit of time to shake out, because of course that ADP is going to take about a week to adjust, given everybody kind of pushing Darrell Henderson down their draft boards. Now, I will say, if Darrell Henderson drops to where we're now drafting him as a running back 3, if he is now going as just a high upside guy, not someone that everybody's projecting to be an automatic starter, that's when I'll begin to get a little interested about a Darrell Henderson. So as of now, I'm not moving him down that much, just given the fact that, I mean, this was a running back that I was already ranking him, assuming that we were going to have other players coming into this scenario. Now, we didn't know if it was going to be Sony Michel, Melvin Gordon, Le'Veon Bell. We had no idea who it was going to be. Sony Michel, in my opinion, is actually one of the worst case scenarios for a Darrell Henderson, however. And I know a lot of people want to go, well, Mason, with the Darrell Henderson and a Sony Michel, I mean, Sony Michel is a bum. Why do you think Sony Michel is going to all of a sudden be the running back 1 in Los Angeles? And I'll say, I don't think Sony Michel is going to be the running back 1 in Los Angeles. I think Sony Michel is brought in as a complementary running back to a Darrell Henderson. I think Darrell Henderson's still going to be the main guy there, but I think this is going to be a lot closer to a 60-40 split than a lot of people want to assume. And now if we go back and we actually look at Darrell Henderson this past season, I know that PFF wants to grade him out extremely well in his starts. And while, yes, that's fun to go out there and talk about, and just like while we were talking about to sell Darrell Henderson last year when we knew that Cam Akers was the better running back, another red flag that you have with Darrell Henderson is we have already seen what happens when Cam Akers isn't in this situation. We have already seen what it means for Darrell Henderson's fantasy production, in that Sean McVay is not willing to use Darrell Henderson as a 3-down workhorse running back. It's not happening. I mean, last year, despite everybody going out there and talking about how impressive he was, Malcolm Brown got a decent amount of run here as the running back too, and it was closer to a split backfield than a lot of people want to assume, even when Cam Akers wasn't healthy enough to get a single snap in the game. So going through and seeing that Darrell Henderson only had 4 games with over 10 fantasy points last year, going and seeing that he was the running back 43 on a points per game basis. Now, I will say, of course, that's hard to look at overall and go, well, Mason, can we take anything from that, given the fact that Cam Akers finished the year strongly, given the fact that they had Malcolm Brown there? Well, I think that Sony Michel actually plays a larger role than what you had with Malcolm Brown this past season. Not saying Sony Michel is going to be the starting running back there, but if you're talking about Sony Michel, yes, he's a bad running back, but I think he's probably a little better than Malcolm Brown. I mean, we go and look at Sony Michel, and I know that a lot of people want to just say that he is a straight up bum, and I agree with you. He's not good, but the reason that a lot of people have just such harsh feelings towards Sony Michel is because he was drafted in the first round of that 2018 class. He was drafted ahead of his running back teammate in Nick Chubb, both coming out of Georgia. And of course, a lot of people want to hold on to that and go, well, the expectations were sky high for Sony Michel. And we also have to remember, this is a team that his rookie season, I mean, the Patriots are in the Super Bowl. So everybody's going out there and seeing Sony Michel on the big stage his rookie year, where Sony Michel was a very one-dimensional running back with only getting usage in first and second down scenarios, which were obvious running down scenarios for the New England Patriots. But we don't necessarily know that's exactly how we're going to have his usage in Los Angeles, because with the Sony Michel, if y'all remember how they were deployed at Georgia, it was intriguing in that Sony Michel was actually the pass-catching running back in Georgia when Nick Chubb was the first and second down bruiser. And I'm not saying Sony Michel's a great pass catcher, but I'm saying I think maybe he's capable. Maybe that's why they actually highlighted him in the last preseason game in the receiving game, going, hey, look, Sony Michel can do it. We didn't ask him to do it, but that doesn't mean he can't. So maybe Sony Michel gets some usage in the receiving game as well. So Darrell Henderson, as of now, I'm saying that we can't draft him because he was going in the 4th round. If he begins to fall to the 5-6 turn, if he's going in the 6th round, when this is all said and done, maybe all of a sudden we start drafting Darrell Henderson. But for now, I mean, I'm just going to be out on him. Okay, so now let's go over to Nick Chubb, someone that y'all know we are going to include on this list. And I will say that Nick Chubb has started to fall drastically in fantasy drafts. So back when we initially included Nick Chubb on the players that we could not draft this upcoming season, back then he was going in the 1st round. And there were a lot of people on YouTube coming out advocating why Nick Chubb was such a fantastic pick in the 1st round. And I will say, if you're playing in a non-PPR format, sure, go ahead, draft Nick Chubb in the 1st round, because this is a running back that can have access to a lot of touchdowns. This is a running back that can rack up a ton of yards, because you cannot deny the fact that with the Nick Chubb, he is one of the most talented running backs in the entire NFL. Everybody's going to acknowledge that. But the problem is, in a PPR format, is this is just going to be someone getting no usage in the receiving game whatsoever. And if we go through, if we actually look at what has happened in 2019 and in 2020, I think a lot of people who are kind of coming out here talking about the receiving game usage for Nick Chubb in 2019 when Kareem Hunt was there, they're not necessarily remembering exactly what happened correctly. Because while, yes, you actually had Nick Chubb averaging 3 targets per game in 2019, this was a scenario where it's a night and day difference between the first half of the season and the second half of the season. When the first half of the season without Kareem Hunt there, I mean, Nick Chubb was actually going out and he was getting targeted heavily in the receiving game. This is someone that I think is more than capable at catching passes. And I will say, at the end of this breakdown, we'll get to a scenario where I think that we just lose out on every single penny we've ever invested this year, but we'll get to that at the end. And here, the problem is, as soon as they get Kareem Hunt back from suspension in the second half of the season, I mean, Thomas can pop up the graphic right now for everybody. You actually see the targets, you see the receptions. It's a night and day difference with and without Kareem Hunt. Now, I believe the number was 1.3 receptions per game with Kareem Hunt in 2019, which was the exact same mark in 2020 for Nick Chubb. And we have already provided historical analysis on how important the usage in the receiving game is. So at the end of the day, yes, Nick Chubb is one of, if not the most talented running backs in the entire NFL. But the problem is when you're getting no targets out of the backfield whatsoever, to go in the first round, that is extremely aggressive. Now, I will say he's been falling just slightly. Even though other people are advocating that he should be going in the first, I have seen him fall to the middle of the second round. And I think at that point, it's completely fine to take Nick Chubb. If you're drafting at the 205 in a PPR league, if Nick Chubb falls there, I'm fine with you taking him. Because there's one scenario. There's one scenario where, my God, I mean, talk about my bank account running dry after Travis Etienne injury, after Cam Akers. If something were to happen to Kareem Hunt, I will say Nick Chubb's probably the running back 2 in fantasy. It's probably Christian McCaffrey, then Nick Chubb. If Kareem Hunt is out of this picture, Nick Chubb is an animal, a dominant workhorse running back behind one of the best offensive lines in football. So if that happens, yes, we're dead. But for the time being, I'm not drafting a committee running back in the first round. I simply cannot do it. And now our next running back in the same exact boat here. Just someone getting no usage in the receiving game. So for a PPR format, yes, he's very good, but he's not scoring enough points. It's going to be Derrick Henry. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mason, Derrick Henry, he scores a ton of points. What are you talking about? Guys, I've said this time and time and time again. We saw Derrick Henry's top in range of outcome. I mean, we saw his 99th percentile outcome. It's not getting better for Derrick Henry than what we had in 2020. It simply cannot get better than what we had with Derrick Henry in 2020. He went for over 2,000 rushing yards. He had the season everybody wanted. But the problem is he's getting no usage in the receiving game whatsoever. So without any targets in the receiving game, this is what I want to highlight with the Nick Chubb, with the Derrick Henry. What is the maximum upside that we can find from a running back like this? Because he goes for over 2,000 yards. You have exactly what you want here. He rushes for over 130 rushing yards a game. He comes out and he's the running back 3 on a per game basis. He's the running back 3. I mean, if you want to include Christian McCaffrey, which of course CMC would have crushed him, he's the running back 4. So all of a sudden now, when he's going as the running back 3 in fantasy drafts, when he's going at the 103, you are drafting a player at his ceiling. You're drafting a 27-year-old running back, which we know that historically, this is when you see those running backs fall off a cliff. You're drafting him at the very top end of his range of outcomes. And at the same time, this is someone that's coming off of 2 seasons in which he's combined for over 800 touches, and he's 27 and a half years old. And guys, if you go through, there's only one other running back being drafted inside the top 6 rounds that's 27 and a half years old or older, and that is Mike Davis. There is a reason why there's only one running back, and that's because running backs flame out. Running backs cannot last with that workload. Now, I know Derrick Henry is built differently. I understand Derrick Henry is a monster, which is why I'm willing to draft him. Once we get to about the 106, the 107, I'll take him, because I think at that point, you're actually looking at the risk-reward ratio and it's making sense. But the problem is, if you're seeing these red flags, and I know the red flags aren't as big because it's with Derrick Henry, you're seeing those small red flags pop up, and he's losing out on Arthur Smith, his offensive coordinator, which, I mean, had this Tennessee Titans offense thriving the past 2 years. You add up these red flags and you go, this is a running back being drafted literally at his ceiling based on what we had last year. It makes no sense, and I repeat, no sense at all to draft Derrick Henry in a PPR format. You're playing in non-PPR, sure, go for it. But in a PPR league, I can't. Now, our next running back, someone that I'm sure that everybody coming out to the live streams knows I will never touch in a million years, is going to be a Raheem Mostert. I mean, talking about old running backs here, I mean, Raheem Mostert is someone that I have ranked as the running back 38. ADP has him as the running back 30. And what is so funny is this is a 29-year-old running back. 29-year-old running back. So many running backs don't even make it to this age. Most running backs don't make it to where they're playing in their 29-year-old season. You know how many games he has had with over 20 carries in his NFL career? And we're going to include the playoffs with this. We're going to include the regular season and the playoffs. Raheem Mostert, games with over 20 carries in his entire NFL career. One. At 29 years old, he's had one game with over 29 carries. The only reason, and I repeat, the only reason at all that people even know Raheem Mostert's name and they're expecting him to have any work at all in this 49ers offense instead of Trey Sermon is given the fact that this is someone that in that 49ers playoff stretch, he had some big plays. He looked explosive. He made ESPN. I mean, everybody was watching him because it was the NFL playoffs. Now, if it happened in weeks 2, 3, 4, nobody would be talking about Raheem Mostert right now. Raheem Mostert would have been a quote-unquote flash in the pan. But because people will go, okay, well, he's still on the roster. I mean, I actually think that if this entire backfield stayed healthy coming into the year, he possibly could have been a cut candidate. But regardless, they trade up to get Trey Sermon. Raheem Mostert also getting no real usage in the receiving game. There's no reason to draft him. I wouldn't consider touching him, to be completely honest. Now, our last running back, y'all know who we're going to be talking about here. Let's continue the trend. Let's continue the trend of these guys that don't get receptions. Let's continue the trend of these guys that will look good on the football field, so they'll convince people that it doesn't matter how many fantasy points they actually score, that they should be drafting them in their fantasy drafts because people think they're real-life NFL general managers. Let's go talk about Damien Harris. So Damien Harris is definitely someone that's going to be increasing in price with the Sony Michel trade. Of course, everybody knows to expect that. So I think bringing up his ADP right now is not going to be that important. It's not going to be that useful, to be honest. But here with Damien Harris, I mean, I will say one thing real quick about Ramondre Stevenson. Y'all know I've been hyping up Ramondre Stevenson since before the preseason even started. So, of course, us seeing Stevenson just go off the past 2 weeks in the preseason, that makes us extremely excited. And I know a lot of people want to come pour water on the situation, go, but no, Damien Harris is going to be fine. Damien Harris is going to be fine. Ramondre Stevenson hasn't had a first-team rep with the first offense in the preseason. Well, you know who also hasn't? Michael Carter. Michael Carter hasn't had a first-team rep. And the only difference is, I mean, there's really no difference. Both of these were 4th round drafted rookie running backs. You don't expect either guy to be able to command first team reps when, I mean, it doesn't call for it. The team investment isn't there. These guys aren't getting handed that job right away. They have to go out there and earn it. So yes, right now Ramondre Stevenson is not the starting running back in New York, and he wouldn't be the starting running back for New York in a very long time, to be completely honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he's maybe inactive week 1. But what you have to be worried about is that role is going to slowly expand to, by the time we get to the fantasy football playoffs, what's the exact workload you're going to have from Damien Harris? And the problem is Damien Harris isn't necessarily going to give you an elite workload at the beginning of the season either. And we already talked about Harris in depth on a video that just came out. So I'm going to keep it very brief here with this study that we did. But we went and we looked at the past 3 years, and we were trying to identify how important getting usage in the receiving game is for these running backs for them to be successful in fantasy. And what we found is over the past 3 years, if you do some quick math, obviously there have been 72 top 24 finishes over the past 3 years. And out of those 72 top 24 finishes, you know how many of them averaged less than 1 target a game, which is what Damien Harris did last year. That's what Damien Harris has done throughout his entire NFL career. He gets nothing at all in the receiving game. Zero hit that threshold. Now, if you just say, let's double the amount of targets per game that you're actually going to have from Damien Harris this upcoming season. Let's move it up to 1.5, and let's even move the threshold a little higher than that. Let's move the threshold to 2 targets a game. The amount of running backs that had less than 2 targets a game and finished as a top 24 guy over the past 3 seasons, out of the 72 placements, 4. I mean, you're doubling up with guys like Derrick Henry on that list. And I'm telling you right now, Damien Harris, it doesn't matter how much you love him. He's not Derrick Henry. It doesn't matter if Damien Harris goes out there and he scores 8 touchdowns this year. He's not going to be relevant for fantasy. That's not how fantasy football works. That's not how the scoring works. If you think it's broken or not, then hell, go play in a non-PPR format. But if we're playing in a PPR league, we have to acknowledge that we're playing a game here. We're not trying to construct a real-life NFL team. And when we're playing a game, we're trying to score points. Damien Harris is not going to get you those points. Now, thank you, my dudes. Really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I know y'all probably did not. So, of course, go down there, go to the comment section, tell me why I'm stupid. And also, use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. Get our rankings, get our draft guides. Get $25 added to your account with a $10 deposit. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the live stream tonight. Thank you to everybody supporting the show on Patreon. We got some new members in MCGC, Brian, Matthew, Craig, Ian, Woody, Colt, Marcus, Jack, and Nicholas. Thank you, my dudes.